putting it all together, CBO's latest outlook was a bit more optimistic in some ways than the last one, but it's still not exactly a rosy scenario. So just let's begin with the basics. What are the deficits and debt? Where are they headed for over the next 30 years?
It's it's an interesting situation because the deficit is narrowed in 2022, but of course that's from the very substantial pandemic-related spending of 2020 and 2021. We're also seeing very strong revenues that are also lowering the deficit. So we will have lower deficits this year. As a share of GDP, deficits will actually decline for a few more years, both because of the narrower deficit and also because of the very high inflation, which means that nominal GDP is high. So that's the very near term. And of course, that's under current law. So this does not include reconciliation and the PACT Act and other legislation now in front of the Congress. Over time, the challenge, the fiscal trajectory looks a lot worse. So the debt deficits start widening out again, debt ratio starts going up again, and we're projected for the deficit to reach 11.1% of GDP by 2052. And so that's and the average over that 30-year period, 7.3%. So it's just much higher. It's more than double the average of the past 50 years. So the deficit is widening out, and the debt, which we can talk about, will increase accordingly.
Yeah, of course, as the deficits go up and accumulate, that has an effect on the debt. And you mentioned deficits would I mean, they average about 3.5% or something like that over the past several years. It's somewhere around there. So
it's 3.5% over the last 50 years.
Yeah. So I mean, it's quite a break from where we have been historically. And that's true with the debt too, isn't it? I mean, that goes up substantially.
That's right. So the debt is, we project the debt at 98% of GDP at the end of this year. And again, it's held down for a few years by the narrowing deficits and especially by high inflation. The debt ratio begins to rise again in 2024. So just 2 more years, we hit a new record high in 2031. So once we go above 107% of GDP, that's a new high. And then out at the end of the 30-year projection period, we reach 185% of GDP, and then of course we keep going. So that, the challenge is not immediate, it's not this year, but the challenge is that the trajectory is daunting and requires action.